Hello, procurement people. My name's Katherine. I will be your procurement guide. And today's topic is going to be on the series of RFX. Most people talk about the request for proposals, the RFP, but there is a whole series of these types of options that procurement people use. And they all seem to be lumped into one thing, but they are very different items. The request for proposals, which seems to be the most popular that people are aware of, are when we're looking for solutions. But let's get into some of the other ones and when we use those and work our way up. So sometimes, in order to do some market research, organizations will do what's called a request for information. Those are non-binding and they do not lead to a contract. They are just issued for the organization to obtain some information from the marketplace before they go to the next stage, because they may not know if they're going to be writing the proper requirements. They may not know if the market is sophisticated enough for what they want, or if what they're looking for is completely out of date. So sometimes requests for information are issued to gather information, and because they're non-binding and there's no contract involved, a lot of people don't respond because it's just extra time for something that may or may not occur. But it's issued in order to be completely open and fair to the whole marketplace, for the whole marketplace to have the same opportunity to provide information to the organization. That way there's no perceived bias or bias if only one person makes a sales pitch to an organization and then they take that information and issue a request for proposals, and it's geared to those specifications. So the request for information, just to gather information and to be open and fair to the whole marketplace, to have the same opportunity to respond to what the organization is looking to buy. Now, from a procurement standpoint, we try to make those as simple as possible because we realize there's effort involved in responding to our questions. So we're not expecting it to be a huge document. And sometimes we have to let the end users know, okay, we have to narrow down the number of questions and the amount of information we're expecting people to give us for free. So that's the request for information. Related to the request for information is an expression of interest. This is used in cases where we're not sure if the marketplace is interested in, or if the opportunity is interesting for what we have before we post the request for proposal. So an expression of interest might be done if we're not sure that there is vendors in the marketplace, or if we know that there is a shortage. Is there anybody who's even going to respond, or should we just try to do it in-house or keep going with whatever we're doing already? So expression of interest, just to find out who's interested, is there a marketplace? And sometimes we'll do that with a budget or a limitation, just to find out, okay, are we going to have anybody even bother when this is what piece of opportunity we're offering and our budget constraints? Although I must admit, it's very rare anybody's willing to admit their budget constraints, but we put it out there because normally it might be something that the marketplace expects downstream business from. And that's a whole other topic that we'll get into another time. So request for information, expression of interest, non-binding, no contract comes out of it. It's just information gathering. Then we have the invitations to quote, requests for quote, invitations to tender, and those are all depending upon the complexity and size of what the organization is buying. And in those cases, the specifications are already defined, and really it is a pass or fail, lowest price wins. A lot of times people mix up their terminology and sometimes think a request for quote will allow them to assess other things, but ultimately those are price-based only as long as you pass all of the requirements. So there's a list of specifications, delivery timelines, warranty period information, all listed that is check, 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 and then lowest price wins. The tender is a very highly complex, price-based process, but we'll talk about that in more detail in another video. This is just an overview of the various types that we have. Then when we get from those, and those a lot of times are very heavily used on goods or very defined services like blind cleaning. So it's usually priced in some policies that, okay, under a certain threshold will just be a simple ITQ. And you will find this in the government policies. A request for proposals may be issued depending upon the risk and complexity of what the organization is buying. And so the request for proposals is issued when we want to look at more than price. We're looking for a solution. We want to assess the experience. We want to assess the approach. We want to assess maybe the team qualifications or the corporate entity, like value added. And then price is a factor in the request for proposal. So very simply put, the request for quote, price-based, request for proposals, value proposition, and assessing more than just price. And so those are usually the ones where we have a lengthy criteria and proposals that are like information that it needs to be gathered and then are assessed on corporate capabilities, qualifications and experience, approach and methodology, and then price. Price is based on proposal price in relation to what the lowest price is multiplied by the points available, or there is another option, which is the value for money equation, where your total price is divided by the points you've received, so that, you know, the higher your points in the other areas, the better your price per point is. So that, again, we'll get into real detail in future episodes about the request for proposals evaluation criteria. In addition to the request for proposal, they seem to be lumped in as well, is a negotiated request for proposal. And that's a step up from the request for proposal, which is a contract A, contract B, pretty straightforward. Then there is like negotiated request for proposal, which is rank and run. Then there is the negotiated request for proposals, which is a best and final offer. And then ultimately there's joint solution procurements, etc. But for simplicity's sakes, request for proposal is assessing more than price. So there is also another item that sometimes the acronyms get mixed up, the RFQU. Some people call it an RFQ, but then other people call the request for quote an RFQ. But a request for qualifications or a request for pre-qualification, or in some sectors they call it a source list. So there are situations where a pre-qualification process is issued. Again, it's non-binding. It's just to assess qualified suppliers to be considered for future opportunities. Now, this could be a whole episode unto its own, as well as to when the request for qualifications process is used, whether it's used in a multi-stage procurement with an RFP, or if it's used as a source list for ongoing smaller opportunities in order to save time and effort, rather than going out to RFP every single time you need a project manager, for instance. There are other items as well, NOIs, notice of intent of a direct award, or there is ACANs, where advanced contract award notices, that's with the federal government. There are so many acronyms across all the public sector entities in Canada that probably should come up with a Wikipedia of the cross-referencing between them all, but those are the main ones that are in use. So hopefully this quick overview is helpful and gives you a better understanding of the various options of obtaining information, quotes, and market input into acquiring goods and services in the public sector. Thanks for watching. Please hit like if this was helpful, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next episode.